we looked at and define what is called the continuity of a function at a point. So intuitively, limit of a function at a point is the value of the function that it is expected to take by looking at the values nearby. So what happens, what would you like to say if the function is actually defined at that point and the value you expect it to take is actually equal to the value that the function is given at that point? Then we will say there is a continuity in the behavior of the function. What it is expected to behave at nearby points, that implies what it should behave at that point also. That's why we define what is called the continuity of the function at a point to be the case when the value expected is equal to the value given. So f is a function on an interval a to b, c is a point in the interval a b. We say it is continuous at the point c if the limit x going to c is equal to f of c. So, whereas for a limit to be defined, the function need not be defined at that point. You can still analyze the limit of a function at a point. The function may not be defined at that point. But for continuity, the function has to be defined at that point, and the value expected, that is the limit, should be equal to the value of the function at that point. Equivalently, in terms of the epsilon delta definition, it says given any epsilon bigger than 0, there is a delta, say that whenever x minus c is less than delta, x is in the neighborhood of the point c by a distance at the most delta, fx is close to c by a distance epsilon. That is epsilon margin for error. That is limit only, saying that the limit is equal to f of c. So once you have understood the concept of limit, continuity is straightforward, that is limit is equal to the value of the function. If the domain is a closed interval, so left endpoint is a, at the endpoint a, we can only define limit from the right side. So saying that f is continuous at the point left endpoint a means that the right hand limit is equal to the value of the function at the point a. And similarly at the point b, continuity will mean that the left hand limit at b is equal to the value of the function at that point. So now I can say a function is continuous in an interval if it is continuous at every point in that interval. Whether the interval is open or closed doesn't matter. So for a closed interval, continuity at the endpoints will mean the respective left hand or the right limit should be equal to the value of the function at that point. So that is continuity of a function on an interval. But still keep in mind, whenever we say a function is continuous on an interval, that does not mean it is a property of the function on the interval. Continuity is still a local property. It is a property of the function at a point. Right? So saying it is continuous everywhere is saying that it is continuous at every point. Right? Still it is a local property. Keep that always in mind. So let us look at some examples which are straightforward. Look at the function fx is equal to x. We know the limit is equal to x going to c is c. So that is, look at the function mod x. Why is mod x continuous? You can use this inequality. This we have already proved. Mod x minus mod c, absolute value of that is less than or equal to absolute value of x minus c. So for a given epsilon, what is the delta? You want mod x to be close to mod c, but that is less than or equal to mod of x minus c. Right? So you can choose epsilon equal to delta if you like. So x minus c less than delta will imply fx minus f of c is less than. You can also prove it by sequential criteria. You want to show if an goes to a, then mod an goes to mod a. That will prove continuity at the point a for the function mod. Okay? Whichever way you like. Trigonometric functions are continuous. So that will either you can assume or you can use your trigonometric identities. Sin x minus sin c, use trigonometric identities. Right? Is less than, because sin is bounded by sin theta is less than theta and cos is bounded by 1, so this is less than x minus c. So sin x minus sin c is less than x minus c. So again you can have epsilon equal to delta. Whenever x minus c is less than delta, sin x minus sin c will be less than epsilon. Okay? So again continuity. Greatest integer function, obviously we have seen that at the integral points the left hand limit is not equal to the right hand limit. So the limit at the integral points do not exist. So the function cannot be continuous because for a function to be continuous, first of all, limit should exist and should be equal to the value of the function at that point. So by definition itself, if limit does not exist, this function is not continuous. Let us look at the function sine 1 over x for x not equal to 0 and 0 equal to 0. Okay? For continuity, I have to define the function at the point 0 if I want to analyze continuity at the point 0. The limit of this sine 1 over x as x goes to 0 does not exist. Does everybody have an intuitive idea why it doesn't exist? Because you look at the value 1 over x, as x goes to 0, what happens to 1 over x? It is going to increase. So it is going to go through all the points n pi and n pi plus pi by 2. So somewhere the values will be equal to 0, and at the other points the value will be plus 1, or similarly you can have minus 1 also, as close to 0 as you want it. The function takes both 0, plus 1 and minus 1 as close to 0 as you want it. What is the meaning of that? That means the limit of this function sine 1 over x as x goes to 0 does not exist, because then I can have two sequences, right? One of the type n pi, right? 1 over x is equal to n pi. What will happen in that case? Sequence will be f sine of n pi, constant sequence 0, so that will go to 0. But if I take n pi plus pi by 2, 1 over x is equal to n pi plus pi by 2, right? At these points, the value is equal to 1, so that sequence goes to 1. So I have two different sequences both going to 0, but f of those sequences go to different limits. So the limit does not exist, right? So this is what is written here. So look at 1 over n pi. This sequence goes to 0. This sequence yn, that is 2n plus pi by 8, right? This is the value of yn. So xn goes to 0, yn goes to 0 because n is coming in the denominator of both. But if you look at f of xn, that is identically 0, that goes to 0. F of yn goes identically, that is identically 1. Constant sequence 1, that goes to 1. So I got two different sequences going to 0, but the limits of the images of these sequences are different. So limit does not exist, so the function is not continuous. So it is discontinuous at the point. Operations on continuous functions, the limit theorems for sequences, limit theorems for algebra of limits for functions give you the theorems, namely if f is continuous, multiply by r, rf is continuous, f plus minus g is continuous, product is continuous, and if g of c is not 0, then f divided by g is defined in a neighborhood of c, and that is also continuous at the point c. These follow from the corresponding theorems for limits, because the corresponding points the limit exists and are the ratios, so they will be equal to the value of the function. So as a consequence of this, you can say that every polynomial function, everybody knows what is a polynomial function? Yes? A function of the form px is equal to an x to the power n plus an minus 1 and so on. So plus a0, x belonging to r. These are all real numbers, a0, a1 and a2. So this is a continuous function because it is a sum product of continuous function. The constant function is continuous. The function fx is equal to x is continuous. Multiply with itself. X square is continuous. Xn is continuous. Multiply, add, you get a polynomial function. So using those limit theorems, any rational function wherever it is defined px by qx, p is a polynomial, q is a polynomial, will be continuous. Trigonometric functions and all the rational combinations are continuous. So these are all examples we have all gone through. So let us not bother much about them. Let us look at what is called the composite of two functions. F is a function defined on an interval, on a say domain A to R. A is a subset of real line. G is from B to R. So that G composite F makes sense. What is G circle F? That is a composite of two functions, right? F takes points of A in R, and that points are part of B, and G is defined there, so G takes that point to somewhere else. So G composite F, that means first take a point x, apply F to it, you get F of x, apply that to G to that, you get G of F of x. That is a composite function. So whenever that function is defined, it is a continuous function. If F is continuous at C, so C will go to F of C, which is inside B. G is defined there, so G should be continuous at the point F of C. Then the composite function is continuous at the point C. Statement is clear to everybody? The composite function is continuous. So what is the proof of that? You can give a proof either by sequences or by epsilon delta method, whichever you like. So let us give a proof by sequences. So let us take, I want to prove that the composite function G circle F is continuous at the point C. So what shall I do? What should be my first step? Take a sequence, I have to find a limit and show limit is equal to the value of the function at that point. So take a sequence which converges to that point. So take a sequence xn which converges to C. Then what do I know about the function f? F is given to be continuous at the point C. So what should happen? F of xn will converge to f of C by continuity of the function f. Now what G is given to be continuous at the point f of C. So G of f of xn will converge to G of f of C. So that proves that the composite function is continuous. Right? So I have shown whenever xn converges to C, G circle f of xn converges to G circle f of C. So that proves the composite function is continuous. If you want to see a epsilon delta method of that, probably I think there is no time today, so let me skip that part today. If later on some time is there, we'll show you this part. So let us look at some examples. For example, look at this function. Looks like quite a complicated function. X cube cos 4x, cos 4 square root mod x and so on, blah 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 blah. All this is a continuous function. I can say safely it is a continuous function because all the functions involved are continuous. Either it is algebra of continuous functions or composite of continuous functions. So it is a continuous function. So by that theorem, I can now simply in one line say this is continuous by those limit theorems and the fact composite of continuous functions is a continuous function. So that is the use of the theorems that we prove. Let us look at, this is very important in any part of life, not only mathematics, more so in mathematics. If you want to understand a concept, when is something true, you should also understand when that thing is not true. That is equally important. What is truth is in comparison with what is lie. Right? If you want to know what is the importance of truth, you want to understand whether this statement is true or not, you should understand what is the meaning of saying it is not true. Right? What is the probability that this ceiling will fall down today? I don't know the probability. Yes, I don't know the probability. Yes, listen now. Okay, I don't know that probability, I don't want to know that probability, but it is equal to knowing that this ceiling will not fall down today. That is important. Knowing this probability or that probability, both are equivalent statements. So always, whenever you come across a concept, something is true, look at what is not true. That will help you to understand what is true. So we want to understand when is a function not continuous. Like we understood, when the limit does not exist, we analyze that. And so limit does not exist, meaning at least you find one sequence xn converging to C, f of xn does not converge to f of C. Or find at least two sequences xn and yn both converging to C, fxn converges to some other limit, fin converges to some other limit. Right? So similarly, we want to understand what is the meaning of saying a function is not continuous. So let us look at, a function is not continuous, the reasons could be, first of all, obvious reason is that limit does not exist. So when does the limit does not exist? Non-existence of the limit can happen in two ways. One is called essential way, namely either the left hand limit or the right hand limit or both don't exist. Existence of limit depends on left hand and right hand limit. So one possibility, either the left or the right hand limit at that point or both of them do not exist. Such a point is called a point of essential discontinuity for the function. For example, look at the function 1 over x. At the point x is equal to 0, both left hand and right hand limits do not exist. So this is a point of essential discontinuity for the function. What is the other possibility? Another possibility is that both left hand and right hand limits exist but are not equal. That is the only way they can imply that the limit of the function does not exist. So such a point, what will happen in such a case, like this function, on this side, on the left of 0, the function is minus 1, on the right of 0, the function is 1. So if you look at the left hand limit, that is equal to minus 1, the right hand limit is equal to plus 1. So the left hand and right hand limits both exist, but they are not equal. So then in that case, there will be a jump in the graph of the function. When you are moving from left to right, when you reach that point, there will be a jump. Either you will be jumping up or jumping down. So that's why it is called a jump discontinuity for the function. Another possibility can happen. Both left hand and right hand limits exist. They are equal to L. But what can go wrong? That is not equal to value of the function at that point. That was the very first example I looked at. When 2x plus 1, and at the point 1 the value we gave it as 5. That was not the value expected of it. The limit was equal to 3, but that was not equal to the value of the function at that point. Such kind of functions are said to have a discontinuity which can be removed. Because the limit exists, if we change the value of the function at only one point, then the function becomes continuous at that point. So that's why this is called a removable discontinuity. One example I have already given to you. So let us look at another example, x sine 1 over x. The 2x plus 1 is one example. This is another example. At the point 0, let us give some value alpha. Okay. So for what value of alpha I can make this function continuous? Alpha equal to 0, because for this x sine 1 over x, we have already calculated the limit as x goes to 0, and that was equal to 0. So if alpha is equal to 0, I can make it continuous. This is the graph of the function. Can you just visualize the graph of the function? Why this should look like this? Okay, let me just indicate why the graph should look like this. Fx is equal to x sine 1 over x. Right? As we said, absolute value of this function is less than or equal to mod x. So the graph of the function is going to lie between graph of y equal to mod x. Right? Positive, negative. And sine is going to also play a part there. And sine is wave. Okay? So if you combine the two, it is going to lie between these two lines. And it is a sine function, so it has to go on, right, fluctuating and coming cramped and coming near 0. If I don't put x, I look at only sine 1 over x, then what happens? Then it is the same graph, but now this, instead of this line, it will be 2 plus 1 and minus 1, and the graph will be going up and down. Then the limit will not exist, because it is not making it come closer and closer to 0. So you can see in picture also, why putting x in front of sine 1 over x make the limit exist at the point 0, because we are making it converge. Okay. So alpha equal to 0 will make it a removable discontinuity. I think I am tempted to show at least one. That is a jump discontinuity. Function comes and jumps down. That is something called jump discontinuity. This is essential discontinuity at the point C. Okay, I think let me skip the other one, and let us go to some important property. Why continuity is important? Why we bother so much about continuity? So let us look at consequences of continuity. The first theorem is going to be called intermediate value property. It says the following: f is a function defined on an interval a b to r, and it is given to be continuous. We are going to look at properties of continuous functions. What consequences does it give you? Take any number r between the value at a and the value at b. So this is the point a, this is the value at this point f of a, this is the point b, and the value at value at b is f of b. Right? Take any value r in between. So this is the value r in between. So this is the value r in between I am taking. F of a is here, f of b is here, this is the value r. So let me draw this line, horizontal line at the value r that I am choosing between a and b. Now if I want to draw the graph of the function from the point at the value at A is f of A, the value at B is f of B. From here, if I want to go to that value, somewhere I have to cross that horizontal line y equal to r. There is no physical way that I can go from this point to this point in a continuous way without lifting my hand and not crossing this line. So that means if I want to draw a graph which is continuous, then I have to cross this line somewhere. And crossing means what? That means there is a point here, okay, where it crosses. That means there is a value C where this value r is taken. So there is a value C where this value is taken. Right? So the statement of the theorem says that then there is a point C in AB, say that f of C is equal to r. That means if I give you a value in between two values which are taken, if I give you any intermediate value r between f of A and f of B for a continuous function, then that value C is also taken at some point in the domain. There is no way you can escape it. So every value between f of A and f of B is taken. So that is what is called intermediate value theorem. And as a consequence, because between f of A and f of B every value is taken, that whole interval is in the range. Right? That means what? If a continuous function maps intervals to intervals, if I take a continuous function, if I take an interval, then the image of an interval is again a interval. Right? Because every value is taken in between. There is no break. So that is what corollary says. If f is continuous, then I is an interval, then its image f of I is a set. That is also a interval. Right? And what does it geometrically mean? Geometrically it means if I want to draw the graph of a continuous function, I should not lift my pen. If I start at one point, I want to reach at some other point, I should not lift. I should be on the paper only going continuously. Because I will lift, that means there is going to be a break in the image. Right? That value will not be taken. For example, if there is a jump, for example, let us just look at if there is a jump. Supposing the graph of the function looks like this. There is a discontinuity at this point. At this point there is a discontinuity. At this point, for example, this value is taken, but is this value taken anywhere? This will not be taken. Right? So that was because while going from here, I have lifted my hand and then gone here and started drawing it. Right? So saying geometrically that the function is continuous means you can draw the graph of the function on a paper, right, without any break. There is no break in the graph of the function. Let us say that much. See, now you see how calculus is giving you a picture. A formula is given to you for a function. Some formula is given to you, right? For example, that complicated thing was given, that sine, cos, power and something. I said it is a continuous function. That means in its picture, there is not going to be any break. So that is the first characteristic of a function that we get from calculus, the limit. It's like describing a terrorist, right? I tell it has long eyes. So first thing is continuous, property continuous. So you can draw eyes, you can draw a continuous curve, continuous graph. Okay, first property. Similarly, we will uncover by the method of calculus more and more characteristics of a function and eventually draw a picture of that function. That is what calculus is mostly about. Okay? Right, so this is the next important property of continuous functions is very important property, is called maximum and the minimum property, and that says the following. Supposing the domain of a function is a closed bounded interval AB. This is crucial here. Domain is a closed bounded interval AB and function is continuous. Then the conclusion says mod fx is less than or equal to m for some m for all values. What does it geometrically mean? That means the values fx are all going to be less than or equal to, absolute value less than or equal to mod m. So that means in the picture I can say, if I draw the graph of the function like this, right, and if it is on an interval a to b, then there is a line, this is minus, this is plus m and this is minus m. The graph of the function is going to lie between these two values. That is what is meaning of saying f of x is less than or equal to mod m. That means minus m less than or equal to fx less than or equal to plus m. So these two lines are going to bind the graph of the function. The graph is going to be between this horizontal strip. Okay. So that is the first property. Not only that, not only the graph is bounded, not only the range of the function is bounded, it says, so this is saying that the range of the function is a bounded set. It is between the interval minus m to plus m. It says something more. It says not only it is bounded, it attains its maximum and the minimum. Meaning what? There are points c1 and c2 in the interval such that f of c1 is always bigger than or equal to f of x for all x in AB. That means at a point c1, the function takes largest value. F of c1 is bigger than f of x for every point x. And similarly, at the point c2, f of c2 is less than or equal to f of x. That is the minimum value of the function. That means if a function is defined on a closed bounded interval AB and it is continuous, not only its range is bounded, in fact, I can find the smallest value in the range, I can find the largest value in the range, and those values are taken at points. That means there are points in the domain C1 and C2, and so that f of C1 is the largest value, f of C2 is the smallest value. And that means what? That means the image of f of AB, what is going to be the image? It is going to be f of C1, that is the largest value, this is the smallest, so the interval f of C2 comma f of C1. So I have called that a small m and capital M. Call f of C1, so if you like, you can call this f of C1 as capital M and call f of C2 as small m. Okay? So if you do that, then f of AB is equal to, the range is again a closed bounded interval. That is very crucial. So this means for a continuous function, the range, if the domain is closed bounded interval, then the range also is a closed bounded interval. And the smallest value, right, in that interval, the left hand point is the smallest value, the right hand point is the largest value. Intermediate value property gave you images of intervals are intervals, but we are saying something more. If the domain is a closed bounded interval, the image also is a closed bounded interval. The range also is a closed bounded interval. And there is another property of continuous functions. We are not going to prove these theorems because proofs are slightly complicated beyond the scope of a first year calculus course, but we will understand these theorems and use these theorems. Okay? And geometrically, intuitively, they are very clear theorems. So let us look at another theorem called intermediate value property. Supposing AB is an interval, so this is a point B, and let us say this is also A, and there is somewhere this is B. That means I have got this square. Supposing, so AB is an interval, suppose I am given a function f defined on the interval A to B, such that its image also lies in the interval A to B. It is a function from AB to AB. Okay? So where will be the graph of the function? It will be visible inside this square. Right? So at the point A, let us say this is the value f of A. Right? F of A. At the point B, this is the value corresponding to the point B, f of B. Now the function is continuous. From here I want to go here. So which way I will go? I will go somewhere. This is the graph of the function. But this function has a very special property, this graph. Because this is a square, I can draw the diagonal. Because this is a square, and what do you see? The graph has to cut the diagonal somewhere. The graph has to cut the diagonal somewhere. Because the function is defined in an interval AB, range also is a part of AB, so the graph is a part of this square, is inside the square only. And if you want to go from the left wall to the right wall in a continuous way, you have to cross the diagonal somewhere. There is no other way out. You will miss the diagonal. And if you are cutting the diagonal here at this point C, what is the value f of C? What is the value f of c? I should hear a loud answer actually. C, because it's a diagonal. Y equal to x. And what is the meaning of saying that? Means at this point, there is a point at least c where f of c is equal to c. That means that point remains fixed under the function. The function does not do anything to that point in the domain. At least there is one point to which f can do nothing. It leaves it unchanged. It leaves it fixed. That is why it is called fixed point theorem. So let me state fixed point theorem. If f is a function from an interval ab to ab and it is continuous, then there is a point c. Say that f of c is equal to c. I have drawn the picture again, so should be clear. Okay. So that is what is called the fixed point theorem. Now let us come to something important, which again all are important. I shouldn't be stressing again and again. Supposing f is a continuous function and it is also 1-1 function. Some additional condition is put now. Not only f is continuous, it is also a 1-1 function. 1-1 means what? Different points go to different images. What is the range of this function? Can you say something about the range of this function? Because it is continuous, the range is again an interval by intermediate value property anyway. So f is a function defined on an interval ab because it is 1-1. So f is a function on an interval to another interval, that is a range. It is 1-1, and if I look only at the range, then it is a 1-to-1 function. It is a 1-1 and also onto. If I restrict, instead of r, I put the range there. Then from the interval ab to its range, which is again an interval, function is a 1-1 onto function. It is a bijective function, and every bijective function has a inverse. So there is an inverse function defined from the range to ab, and this theorem says that function is always continuous. That the inverse function is always a continuous function. A very important consequence. You don't have to do anything. It says, so for example, if it's continuous and 1-1, then obviously it will be a monotonically increasing function. Is it clear? If a function is 1-1, it has to be monotonically increasing or decreasing. Because if it starts increasing, it cannot come down. Then it will no longer be 1-1. So this is also obvious that if a function is 1-1, it must be either increasing or strictly decreasing. And the inverse function on the range, if I is the range, is also a 1-1 onto continuous function. This is the important property for continuous functions which are also 1-1. Okay? For example, let me give you a simple application of this. Look at the function a raised to power n. For any point a bigger than or equal to 0, look at a to the power n. That is a function from the positive half of the interval, right? Real line, 0 to infinity to, actually I shouldn't be putting close because you don't know what is. So let me treat this as open, okay? Don't put it close. Let me say this is a mistake. So let me make it, this is open here, okay? Typo. Can you say this function is 1-1? Actually, one can prove not only it is 1-1, it is also a onto function. And we have already seen a raised to power n is a continuous function. So this is 1-1 onto continuous function. So inverse must be a continuous function. What is the inverse function? You will say a point a goes to an. So where will that point come back to? A point b will come back to b raised to power 1 over n. So this is how nth root function actually is defined. For any real number, positive real number, there is a number called nth root of it, and it is uniquely defined by this. And not only that, it also says that b going to b raised to power 1 over n is a continuous function by theorem. So it has an inverse, and the inverse is a, so nth root function is a continuous function as a consequence of this theorem. So let us just recall what we have done till now. We looked at what the concept of limit of a function, right? Limit is the value expected of a function by looking at its behavior at nearby points. And if the function actually is defined at that point, and the value expected is equal to the actual value, then the function is continuous. Geometrically, it means there is no break in the graph of the function. Right? That is what limit and continuity we have discussed. Now let us come to the next topic, because the next topic I think you all know very well, but let me just motivate what we are trying to do. Look at the graph of these two functions. One is f, other is g. There are no breaks in the graph of both of the functions. Right? Both are continuous functions. But still there is a difference between the two functions. Obvious difference is there. Yes? It's like they are telling both the terrorists came from some, say, Nepal, right? But still there is a difference between the two. Probably the height of the two was different. Right? Both looked like some kind of Chinese origin or that origin, right? But probably. Good. So what is the difference between the two? Yes? Yellow t-shirt with specs. What do you think is the difference between the two graphs of the two? Yes? There is a corner, right? In the graph of the first one, there is no corner. So how do we make this corner precise? Geometric property that there is a sharp edge in the graph of the function. There is no sharp edge in the graph of the function. How I make that mathematically precise so that I can analyze this? Very good. So let us, qualitative difference between the two. Here you can draw tangent to every point, but here you will say you cannot draw a tangent. But what is a tangent? Yes? Good. Let us hear his definition. What is a tangent? Line perpendicular. Very good. So you can see this is not the normal definition. He says take the normal and take a line perpendicular. That is not the normal definition of a tangent. Would you like to say what is definition of tangent? Yes? Holding the bag. You are holding the bag, right? Just behind you. Yes? Tell me, what do you think should be called as a tangent? Is a line. Which line should be called as tangent? It touches a given point. That's all. You see, already what you think you already know very well, there is a problem. What is the tangent to a curve at a point? So let us try to make it slightly more precise. If you want, mathematically, if you want to draw a line at a point, what are the things you should know? You should know the point. Your ordinary geometry, coordinate geometry tells you. You should know the line and you should know at what angle it is inclined to x-axis. Right? You should know a point through which it passes and you should know its slope. That's all. Right? So I want to know what is the slope of that line at that point. Okay? Which I should call as tangent. So I already know this is the point where I want to draw the tangent geometrically. So let us draw a line through it. I don't know whether this line is the tangent or this line is the tangent or that line is the tangent. I don't know which one. But I would like to call that line as a tangent provided I know its slope. How do I define the slope? Okay. Now if you look at this line, in a neighborhood of this point, this line is cutting the curve at 2 points. Right? So intuitively, geometrically, you would like to define a tangent to be a line which cuts the graph of the function only at 1 point in any small neighborhood if you look at it. Take a point, take a neighborhood of it and draw that line. That line should cut the graph only at 1 point, whatsoever small that neighborhood should be. Then you will like to call that as the tangent, intuitively, right? But this is cutting at 2 points, but doesn't matter. I want to make it 1 point, so I'll try to merge this point Q with P. And I'll try to calculate the slope of that line when it merges. Slope of a line passing through 2 points, I know it by your formula for coordinate geometry. I know the coordinates of this point, I know the coordinates of this point, so I know the slope of that. So what I will do, I will calculate the slope of this line and let this point Q come to P, that means this point X come to C. That means there is some limiting thing going to come into picture. X is going to come closer and closer to C. So we do that. So this line which cuts in 2 points is called a secant line. So let us calculate the slope of that secant line and try to get a picture of that. So this is, if I don't show you this limit, then f of c minus f of x divided by c minus x, that is the slope of the secant line joining the point c f of c with the point x f of x. You want to make it merge x going to c, that should give you the slope of the tangent at that point, if that limit exists, right? So that all you know now is called the derivative of the function. So we say f is differentiable on AB if the derivative exists at every point AB. But intuitively, the idea of derivative came because you want to make geometry into mathematics. Geometrically, the notion of tangent to a point, to a curve, we want to make it, define it mathematically, precisely, so that there is no confusion at all. Then, because it is a limit, derivative is a limit, you can have left limit as well as the right limit. You can have the secant coming from the right, you can secant from the left. So left limit, right limit of that, so that gives you left derivative and the right hand derivative for the function. So all of you know that very well. So let us go ahead. Constant function derivative is 0, because what is the secant line? F of c minus f of x. Constant functions numerator is 0, so the limit is 0, so derivative is equal to 0. X to the power n, all of you have done this calculation, so I'll just hurriedly go through. You want to find this limit, so expand this using binomial theorem. That's what you normally do. Things cancel out, divide and take the limit, so that is NCN. All of you have done it, so I'm rushing through. Just for the completeness sake, sin x, cos x, all are differentiable functions. Okay, we are not proving them. Oh, okay, there is a proof again using, you can prove it using your, the point is we are not defined what is sin and cos. So all these things follow once they are properly defined. Using your trigonometric identities, you can prove derivative is cos. Similarly, derivative of cos is sin. Mod x is a function which is, mod x is a function which is continuous but not differentiable. Look at the function x to the power 1 by 3. What is the ratio? The secant line at a nearby point x at 0, f of c minus f of 0 divided by c minus 0 is x raised to power minus 2 by 3. What is the limit of that as x goes to 0? Does not exist, or it goes to plus infinity. So this will not give you slope of the tangent at that point, right? If the limit is different, if the limit is equal to plus infinity, you have to be careful in defining what is called the tangent. Okay, in this case the derivative does not exist, or you can say it is plus infinity. For the completeness sake, let me show you that differentiable implies continuous. A function differentiable is also continuous. Proof very simple. To prove continuity, what I have to do? I have to look at f of c plus h and show it goes to f of c. That means the difference should go to 0. But the difference you can divide and multiply by h. Right? So this h times this multiplication. Now this is a product of two functions. Both are functions of h. Limit of the first function h going to 0 is 0. Limit of the second function as h goes to 0 is the derivative of the function at that point. So by limit theorems, because limit of f exists, limit of g exists, so limit of f into g also exists and is equal to limit of f into limit of g. This limit is equal to 0. So we are using all those theorems here. We did not prove those theorems just for the sake of our pleasure or just because they are listed in your course, because they give you nice properties. So This implies a function which is differentiable is also continuous. Is not differentiable. So differentiability is stronger than continuity. So if a function is not continuous, then it is not differentiable. If P, then Q. If Q is not true, then P cannot be true. Necessary condition. For a function to be differentiable, it has to be necessarily continuous also. So not continuous implies. Just for the sake of giving examples, like we have not defined sine and cos, I just want to state a function called the log function, which I think we start using since 8th standard probably, log tables I think in schools. Okay, 11th, okay, doesn't matter. But what is a log function? What is log function? How is it defined? So, a precise definition which will make it true in lecture probably 19 or 20 later on. It is a function defined on 0 to infinity to r. It is a bijective function with the following properties, which we always use. So log x plus y is log x plus log y. Log 1 over x is equal to minus log x. Log 1 is equal to 0. It is a differentiable function with derivative equal to 1 over x. So at present, we are going to assume that such a function exists. Such a function on 0 to infinity, which is a bijective function, exists with these properties. Later on, when we do integration, we'll show you how to define this function precisely with these properties. Okay? So for time being, we'll assume such a function exists.